Hey, Wilberforce Weekenders, I have a question for you. If you had the power to solve one of these devastating social issues, which would you choose? Youth suicide, homelessness, behavioral disorders, poverty, rape, struggling students, addiction, high incarceration rates? Which one would you choose? I think it's pretty tough. You, like me, are probably deeply grieved about the prevalence of all these issues in the life of America today. But what if I told you there was an all-of-the-above option? What if you could do one thing and decimate every single issue we just listed? Well, there is. Take a look at this chart. In red, you're going to see the number of kids who grew up in fatherless homes that populate these social issues that we spend hundreds of millions of dollars to fight every year. 63% of kids who commit suicide are from fatherless homes. 90% of homeless youth are fatherless. 85% of all kids who show behavioral disorders. 47% of kids living in poverty. 80% of rapists with anger problems didn't have a dad. 71% of all high school dropouts, 75% of adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers, and 70% of youth in state-operated correctional institutions didn't have a dad in their life. The importance of a father's presence in a child's life is rivaled only by the importance of their mother's presence. I bet you can complete this sentence. Ideas have consequences. Bad ideas have victims. That's right. Now, there's a lot of bad ideas floating around out there when we talk about marriage and family. Here's a few of them. If the adults are happy, the kids will be happy. Kids don't need a mom and dad, they just need to be safe and loved. And biology doesn't matter, love makes a family. You may have noticed, maybe not, but every conversation that we have about marriage and family and parenthood, they all have something in common. Whether it's the gossip about the latest celebrity divorce, or our national conversation about marriage policy, or court cases that have to do with two moms on a birth certificate. They all obsessively focus on what adults want. So much so that you might be tempted to think that if adults don't get the outcome they are looking for, that they're the victims. But they're not. When we get questions about marriage and parenthood wrong, the kids pay the price every time. I run a children's rights nonprofit called Them Before Us. Them, the kids, before us, the adults. We're committed to defending children's rights on this side of the womb. You're probably really familiar that children have a right to life. And thankfully, we have dozens of incredible organizations who are fighting to defend that right. But many of us haven't really thought about the fact that kids have a right on the other side of the womb as well. And beyond their right to life, the most important right is the right to be known and loved by the two people responsible for their existence. What do we know about the importance of this right? Well, we could look to international treaties. Check out the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the most widely ratified treaty in the world. Right after listing a child's right to be alive, they list a child's right to be known and loved by both parents. They should be protected. That relationship with their parents is something that should not be arbitrarily severed. They shouldn't be separated from their parents unless it's in the child's best interest. And if they are, they should be swiftly reunited. If that's not possible, the child should still have as much contact with their parents as possible. We could look at the experts and what the experts have to say about what this important right does to the well-being of children. Such as, if we were asked to design a system for making sure that children's basic needs were met, we would probably come up with something quite similar to the two-parent family ideal. Or we could listen to left-leaning child trends, which says, it's not simply the presence of two parents, but the presence of two biological parents that seems to support child development. Or collaborations that state most scholars now agree that children raised by two biological parents in a stable marriage do better than children in other family forms across a wide range of outcomes. Now, if you don't trust the experts and you don't care about the UN, you can look to another source on the importance of this critical child right. You can look at your own life. Now, you probably fall into one of two groups. Either you grew up with a close, loving relationship with your mom and dad, and you enjoyed having your dad coach your t-ball team and your mom talking you through difficult situations at school. There's a good chance you still need them today. And I'd ask you, looking back at your own life, which one of those parents was optional for you? Which one could you have swapped out with no difference on your development and your identity? And the answer is neither. You needed both of them in distinct and complementary ways, and odds are you still do. Now, maybe you're in the other half of the population and you didn't have the relationship that you were made for. Maybe you lost a relationship with one or both of your parents to death, or divorce, or abandonment, or maybe you were created through sperm or egg donation and intentionally denied a relationship with one of those parents. And I'd ask you, did you love it? Would you encourage other people to recreate that childhood experience intentionally? Would you promote it? Would you think that government should incentivize it? The answer is no. Even if you got over it or figured it out like so many of you probably did, many of you would still say, it's one of the biggest wounds of my life. There's power to being connected to these two adults specifically. Social science tells us that statistically, these are the two adults who are the most protective of, connected to, and invested in kids. We know through the waves of adoptees and donor-conceived kids who are scouring the internet to find any information possible about their missing parents, that biological parents offer something that kids crave, and that's biological identity. And we know through mountains and decades of social science research that being raised by these two adults stacks the deck in favor of kids' healthy outcomes and spares them of all those issues that we listed at the beginning of this video. Now, motherlessness and fatherlessness, it's been around forever. We used to lose mothers regularly just through childbirth. We used to have generations of kids who had experienced fatherlessness during times of war. Now, thankfully, modern medicine and modern warfare has drastically reduced the number of parents that have been lost to death. But mother loss and father loss is on the rise. But it's not because of tragedy. It's because of intentionality. These days, kids are losing their mother and father because adult desires are being prioritized above children's rights. And our courts and our laws are playing right along. You're at a worldview conference, right? I'm going to give you a little worldview pop quiz. Of the 5 major religions of the world, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism, what do they agree on? Do they agree on the nature of God? Do they agree on the nature of man? What about the problem in this world? Do they agree on the solution to the problem? Do they agree on the nature of the afterlife? Or do they agree on the definition of marriage? If you guessed the last one, you're smarter than most of politicians in our country. Throughout the world, cultures and religions have identified marriage as the union of a man and woman because it is the institution that unites the two people to whom children have a natural right, and it goes well for child, mother, father, and all of society when we encourage those norms of permanence, exclusivity, and monogamy. Marriage is the most child-friendly institution the world has ever known when it unites the two people to whom children have a natural right. Unfortunately, in the last 5 minutes of history, we've decided to redefine marriage. And as a result, we have undone children's rights to be known and loved by their mother and father. You can look at any country that has legalized gay marriage, and you can see that children's rights have been weakened as a result. Here in our country, you would be hard-pressed to find any government institution that says that kids should have a mother and father. To do so constitutes discrimination. We missed the boat so royally when we were talking about the definition of marriage, because we failed to understand how critical it is to the well-being of kids. That constellation of benefits that same-sex couples are now entitled to involves parenthood. Now, the law has to accomplish something that is biologically impossible, and that is making two adults of the same sex parents to a child. Now, that's a problem, because biologically speaking, two adults of the same sex can never be a parent to a child. So our laws are being rewritten now to say that biology doesn't need to be a basis for parenthood. Now an adult's intent to parent is enough for them to be awarded rights to a child that's not biologically theirs. Now, there's a lot of you in the audience who are probably like me. I'm a parent to a child who's not biologically related to me. And it was a lot harder than simply declaring my intent to parent before the state would place the child in my home. Nope. Like you, I had to go through background checks, screening, vetting, home studies, references, physical exams. I had to submit financials. I had to go through training, and then I had to go through post-placement supervision because social workers aren't fools. Because they understand that it's risky to place a child with a biological stranger. And that's why adoptive parents like you and me, we had to do some hard work. And you know what? That's exactly as it should be. You see, we've learned through adoption that we need this institution to serve the best interest and the needs of children who have lost their parents. But now we're fighting a marketplace of reproductive technologies that serves any adult who has the money and means to acquire a child and hands them a kid, regardless of how qualified they are. And we are codifying that process through laws that say that you can be a parent based on intent, not adoption, and not biology. People, that's a straight up commodification of people. That's simply if you have the money to get a kid, you get one. And our laws say it's just fine. Now, forgive me, but I thought we fought a civil war to end the practice of buying and selling people. But today we're bringing it back in the name of progress. So what do? How do we fight back? Because it feels to me like we're dangerously far down the rabbit hole. The good news is, there's a pretty clear path forward. There's a lot of bad ideas out there about marriage and family, and the way we fight it is to continue to speak about the good ideas about marriage and parenthood and family. Good ideas like gender matters in parenthood, and biology matters in parenthood, and marriage matters in parenthood. And all of the studies and all of the data and all the social science that support those good ideas. And if you want to dive in a little deeper, check out our What Would You Say video called Doesn't Love Make a Family? But the other thing that we have to do, that we have failed to do in the past, is we need to tell the stories of the real victims. How do we communicate to a woman who says, you know, my husband and I, we've fallen out of love. I think we're going to get a divorce. And I know it's going to be hard on the kids, but they'll get over it. Kids are resilient. We could quote the data, the decades of social science that shows that divorce is not a one-time event for kids, that it's usually just the kickoff of numerous events of losses and instability in a child's life. Or we could tell the story of a kid who had to live it. A kid like this. It's been 7 years since their divorce was finalized. And you might think that those 7 years would have brought some sort of peace. Guess again. During those 7 years, my dad remarried, my mom remarried, and then my dad got divorced again. I gained 5 step-siblings, and then lost 3. When you hear people talk about how kids are going to love having 2 homes and 2 Christmases, you could talk about the studies that show that kids of divorce sometimes develop near split personalities in the 2 different homes, or you could share stories like this. I lost myself in every effort to appease each side of my family. Shuffling alone between 2 separate lives meant that I was on the fringe of each family, never an insider. The people I loved most were never in the same room together, and many of them barely even knew the other existed. I missed out on events and celebrations because I would have to spend time with my other family. You're going to see magazine covers that talk about single moms who aren't single because they were the only adult who was willing to act like an adult, but rather single moms by choice. Ones who said, you know what, I've got enough love for both parents. And the kid's not going to care that they don't have a dad because they're going to be so very loved and wanted. You could show them studies about donor-conceived kids and how they suffer diminished outcomes as a result. Or you could tell them stories like this. When I hear how much you wanted me, I cannot also help but think about how much my dad did not want me. He knew the goal of his action was to create a child he would have nothing to do with. Do you understand how that can hurt? That your want is canceled out by his lack of it. We all know of couples who struggle with infertility. Infertility is a crushing load. But just because somebody longs for a biological child, that does not justify intentionally severing a child from a biological parent. Someone who's infertile and is considering using an egg donor should probably be exposed to stories like this. I wonder all the time who my biological mother is. What does she look like? What does she like to do in her free time? What does she do for a job? Does she even know I exist? Does she ever want to meet me? What would I say to her if I met her? There's just so many questions and no answers. Sometimes when I walk down the street, I'll think, have I seen my biological mother today? Maybe I've already seen her and I don't even know it. If love makes a family, then Samantha should have thrived in the home of her 2 dads. Instead, this is what she says. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a mother until I watched The Land Before Time at school. My 5-year-old brain could not understand why I did not have the mother I suddenly, desperately wanted. I felt the loss. I felt the hole. As I grew, I tried to fill that hole with my aunts, my dad's lesbian friends, and teachers. I remember asking my 1st grade teacher if I could call her mom. I asked that question of any woman who showed me any amount of love and affection. It was so instinctive. I craved a mother's love, even though I was well loved by my 2 gay dads. You see, regardless of what the law says, you're never able to legislate away a child's longing for their mother and father. But when you erase moms and dads from parenthood laws, all you do is simply think that kids are crazy for wanting what every child throughout history has ever wanted, to be known and loved by both biological parents. This daughter of 2 moms writes, am I the only one who feels this way? Am I a bad daughter because I wish I had a dad? Is there anyone else who has 2 moms or 2 dads who wonders what it would be like if they were born into a normal family? Is there anyone else who wants to be able to use the word normal without getting a lecture on what is normal? I don't know my real father, and I never will. It's weird, but I miss him. I miss this man I will never know. So friends, if it's true that love makes a family, that the children will be happy if the adults are happy, and that kids don't need moms and dads, they just need to be safe and loved, then all these kids should not exist. But they do. And they do in increasing numbers. These kids who have lost their mother or a father or both because adult desire has been prioritized above their fundamental rights to be known and loved by both biological parents, there's more and more of them every day. And many of them are joining the movement to put them before us. And I hope you'll consider joining us as well.